My name is John Sweetman, and this is Lines of Enquiry Case Notes. Case Notes is a new strand of Lines of Enquiry, where we step away from telling one specific case in detail and instead take some time to reflect, to revisit past investigations, and to respond directly to you, the listener. We'll be speaking with expert guest contributors, diving a little deeper into the issues behind the stories, and responding to some of the much-valued correspondence that comes into our mailbox. If you have a message you'd like to share, a case you'd like us to revisit, or someone you'd like to hear from on future episodes of Case Notes, you can get in touch with us at linesofenquiry@goloudnow.com. And be sure to follow us on Instagram at Lines of Enquiry Podcast to keep up to date. In today's episode of Case Notes, I'm joined by one of the leading voices in true crime in Ireland, Nules Ní Chléirigh. Nules is the creator and host of Ireland Crimes and Mysteries, presented by GoLoud, where she explores some of Ireland's most difficult and often overlooked cases. She's deeply passionate about ethical storytelling with a strong focus on the victims, their families, and the broader context surrounding each case. Nules, you're very welcome.
Thanks for having me, John. I'm delighted to be on Lines of Enquiry, I have to say.
Oh, thank you.
And well done on all the success so far. It's fantastic.
Thank you very much. So, Nules, what first drew you to covering Ireland's criminal cases on your podcast?
Well, I suppose I didn't know I was going to be drawn to podcasts. I used to be listening to, I had YouTube channels, I'd be watching. I was always into true crime, so I'd be watching on YouTube, I'd be listening to other podcasts. And then one day I was out walking my dog and I was listening to a particular podcast, a true crime one, an Irish one, and it was fantastic. And I was kind of going, I wonder, could I do something like that? And I saw a kind of a gap where cases weren't being covered, say, there wasn't a different case being covered in every episode. They were kind of serialised, which is fantastic. But I saw a little gap there and I got to work then kind of teaching myself how to use all the equipment and bought myself equipment and took about 6 months researching my first few episodes and writing out the scripts and then recording and afraid to press publish. It took me a while to actually press it. But then I got there in the end and it kind of just took off. But I suppose what brought me there was a kind of a deep kind of wanting to help the families. You know, there's a lot of the cases that are rarely in the news, especially. I know I've covered a lot of the more high profile ones, but there's also ones like, yourself that aren't covered as much, and I wanted to kind of give them a voice. So that's kind of the aspect I'm coming at it from, if I can help anybody in any way. Yeah. I will certainly try to.
If an episode maybe jogs somebody's memory about something or whatever,
That's what I always say. All it takes is one person to be listening. Loyalties change over the years. A lot of these cases are 30 and 40 years old now. Somebody that was probably a bit nervous or whatever before to come forward, might feel differently now.
Afraid to speak or maybe prevented to speak by somebody who's maybe passed away or something.
And us talking about the cases, brings them back into the public eye and might give them the courage to come forward, with that vital bit of information.
I know, you had covered the Barbara Walsh case.
Yes.
And it was a story that we looked at in the first season. And it's a story I knew nothing about.
Same.
But I went down the rabbit hole.
You do, don't you? You literally do fall down the rabbit hole.
You have to know kind of when to stop.
Yeah.
And especially with that case, not having a resolution.
I know. That's what gets me, for the families is not having this resolution, having to live with it every single day of your life, because I've heard from so many of the families that they do literally live with it every single day in their lives. If somebody dies naturally, be they young or whatever, at least you know where they are. They're down in the graveyard. You can go visit them, as awful and all as that is. But to have a family member that's just vanished into thin air, you don't know what happened to them. You don't know what kind of a debt, more than likely, they had. I just find the whole thing so tragic.
Yeah.
So I do.
Yeah, but like I say, I hope that in covering those cases that maybe something will come of it.
That's the whole.
And even at the very least, it's making people aware that these things happen.
Absolutely.
and can be forgotten about.
And it might start a conversation, be it in, you don't know, in the pub over a pint or something, and a knock-on effect. It might get to the right ears. Even if it helped one case out of all the cases I've done, I'd be saying, job done, I've helped one person.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you're the same, John.
Oh yeah, and I say that brings me on to the next thing about that we're both very conscious that these aren't just cases.
No.
They're people and their families, and how do you keep compassion and respect foremost in what you're doing? Like,
I'm always, every time I'm writing a script, every time I'm researching, I'm always doing it with the family firmly in the forefront of my thoughts. Like, I'm always careful. Well, I hope I'm always careful about how I talk about the cases. Some of them, obviously, when you're doing research, they can be extremely graphic. I try and stay away from the graphics. It's not needed. Do you know what I mean? To tell the story, because you have to be very conscious that family members are listening. You know, victim focused. That's, as you said at the beginning there, John. I obviously have to talk about the perpetrator. I mean, if you're talking about the whole case, but I don't make him the main focus of my attention.
Yeah.
They're a side note in the whole thing. I try and keep it firmly on the victim. And I don't want to turn their tragedies into something sensational, and I just want to tell their story. That's basically it. Tell the story, keep it in the news, keep it in people's consciousness, and, hopefully help. And even for the ones that are solved, like I suppose people might say, sure, why are you doing solved ones then? But it's keeping people, I suppose, it's making them aware.
Yeah.
People become more aware of their surroundings, more aware of who they trust, that these things can happen to anybody at any given time.
And it's like you say, even with cases that have a resolution or an outcome in court or a sentence or whatever, that means the end of the investigation. But like you were saying, it's not the end for the victims or their families.
No.
Like, they have a life sentence regardless of what the outcome is. So it's very important to keep that, I think,
you have to think
in mind.
Yeah, you definitely have to keep that in mind. I suppose you'd be looking at it from, obviously they're living with it, as you said, every day, but then there comes the day in Irish legal, I suppose, the Irish legal world, where they're going, life doesn't mean life for a lot of these guys, and the family are going to have to start dealing with parole hearings and bringing it all back to them again, bringing it all, I think the victims' families actually, they have more of a life sentence than the actual perpetrator.
Absolutely,
because they're getting the short end of the stick all the time.
Yeah, and it's kind of hard. It's hard for the likes of us then, we're focusing on hard evidence and our sources have to be, checked and whatnot. And I think it can sometimes be hard to remain non-judgmental.
Absolutely,
especially,
we're only human.
Yeah, especially me coming from being in the guards and being somewhat bitter and cynical about certain things, maybe the judiciary and stuff like that. But there's no place for that in what we're doing. But it can be hard. It
can be hard. We're only human, as I said. We've got thoughts and feelings. Obviously, you keep some of them to yourself, even though sometimes you'd like to air them a bit more. But I suppose being a former Garda as well, all the work that goes into solving a case for ye, and then half the time the sentences aren't what you'd have hoped.
Yeah. Or it can just,
that must be frustrating.
It can just turn on a dime,
Yes.
like that could be years been put into a case, and you might have what you might think is a slam dunk of a case, and the outcome could be a lot different.
Yeah.
But I learned fairly quick in my career to kind of not take that home with me.
Yeah.
If you go there, it's like what we're doing now. If you do your job or whatever you're doing to the best of your ability and you do it honestly, the rest, you can't carry it with you.
No, you can't. No. And I suppose that's the thing I learned from nursing as well.
Absolutely,
you see a lot of sad stories, obviously, on a daily basis when you're nursing as well, but like that, you have to leave it at the door on the way home. Otherwise, you'd drive yourself mad, we all have mental health as well, so we have to look after it. So we can do the job properly.
Yeah, like people used to ask me about, maybe the gorier aspects of the job, and like, how can you do that? How can you do that? But it's not that you become desensitized. I think it's you realize the importance of the role that you have to play, and that takes the forefront. It's very interesting because, like you said, you spent years nursing, dealing with people and being mindful of people's feelings and what they might be going through or what's happened, and you're still doing that.
Yeah, just in a different way.
Just in a different way. The more I talk to you, I can see where the skills you got are built up in your nursing years.
Yeah.
Have really stood you well now in your
and it's an odd combination, I suppose, in a sense, but it works. It works for me anyway.
It's not much different for me. Like, I'm retired now, 2.5 years or so, and when I retired, I was like, that's it, that's done and dusted. I wrote a book to get it out of my system, and a little bit of exposure from that brought GoLoud knocking on the door.
Yeah,
and something I never ever would have thought about.
Yeah,
and it's
a whole new world.
Yeah, it's a whole new world, and I just didn't know how I'd fit into it, but it seems to work. Like,
you're fitting in fine. You're fitting in fine.
What I do find, and it probably took me a while coming from 30 years in the Guards, I found now that I'm retired, that the shackles are off somewhat. I can speak my mind. I was never afraid to speak my mind. Like, if you ever see me with the tattoos and the whiskers and stuff like that, I was never your typical
Garda Síochána.
Yeah.
Do you find you're able to think outside the box a bit more now?
Oh, absolutely.
Not as rigid as when you were in the Garda.
Because when I was in the Guards, and I was either dealing with fingerprint evidence or handwriting or document evidence or whatever it is, so it was a narrow vision, always with the end goal being you might be in court.
Yes.
That was it. Statement, you might be in court. So you have to do it this way.
Yeah.
And like, I think we touched on it already, like a lot of the cases we cover don't have the resolution that you'd hope for, like missing evidence going missing, victims who are never found, missing persons, court cases that, the outcome isn't what people hoped for. And, do you find those particular stories or cases more difficult to cover or more awkward or less satisfying, shall we say?
No, I don't find them less. I find them very frustrating when you're going through all the research, and especially cases like the vanishing triangle, as it's been called in the press. Like, all these women that went missing back then. Not one of them has been found. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That I find very frustrating. How come not even one of them has been found? To this day, that's what I find extremely frustrating.
Somebody has to know something.
Somebody, of course.
About one of them, if not a few of them.
Do and they're not ancient history, these cases. They're from the 90s, I suppose, late 80s, 90s, kind of. I mean, that's not 100 years ago.
And I suppose it's just unfortunate for those girls that went missing that it was at a time kind of before we were, Big Brother was watching us everywhere, social media, mobile phones.
Ring cameras.
All of these things.
Dash cams. None of that stuff existed back then. Jojo Dullarcher was last seen at a phone box, so that'll timestamp it for you.
Yeah.
So that in itself, and even if there was CCTV, you remember that CCTV back in the day, and you'd be saying, why did they even bother spending all that money on those cameras? Because it's just pixels.
Yeah. Whereas today you can't go anywhere. And you'd like to think that today, the likes of that, all of those
cases,
women going missing couldn't happen or would be solved.
Yeah.
Or at least some of them could be solved.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is the hope, isn't it? But like, you're the professional, here in the sense that, like, without a body and without a crime scene in today's world, are you still coming at it from a back footing?
Yeah, like, I mean, there are cases where there's no body, but there might be a possible scene, there might be traces here, might be traces there, but we have no body, no murder weapon, no physical evidence and that sort of stuff. And even when you do have what you might think is good evidence, it's tying that to a person, be it the missing or the deceased person or a suspect. And getting it through the courts. Like we did that episode there not too long ago with Nora Sheehan. It was decades before he was
brought to justice.
Was brought to justice. But they were lucky in the sense that they just didn't proceed with the first trial.
Yes.
Because if they had and he was acquitted, then that was it. But I can imagine for the investigators and for Nora Sheehan's family, it must have been so maddening and frustrating that this guy was still walking around, not a bother on him.
That's it, and a lot of the times with a lot of these cases, they're walking around and, it's a country place or something. So they're probably living in the same town as the victims' families. I don't know how, I can't comprehend how that must be. You're going down to do your shopping and there's the guy that murdered your sister or your wife or whoever. You know what I mean? It's kind of mind-boggling to me, So I can imagine how frustrating that would be.
Yeah. So is there one case that you've covered that really had an impact on you, or you find it hard to put to bed after you've done an episode that, something that sticks with you?
Well, there's a few, I suppose most of them have an impact to you, but ones that really stick out in my head would be, I suppose, Imelda Keenan would be one. She went missing in Waterford back in 1994. And I suppose the reason for that would be I interviewed her niece, Gina Carey, and that just intensifies it. When you talk to family members, it makes it more real, if you know what I mean. So that one would definitely be one that sticks out. Listening to the emotion, the loss, it just makes it all more real, and everything's still unresolved. They've been begging for it to be upgraded to murder for years, and it's still seen as a missing persons case, which is very frustrating for the family.
Yeah, and she's obviously years not and years just for missing. It to be upgraded,
Yeah, but we're going on over 30 years now, So I can understand their frustration there, So that would be one that would, I'm waiting for the day I hear it has been upgraded for them, so that, they might hopefully eventually get some answers, Other ones then that really stand out to me would be ones involving children or the elderly, both very vulnerable ends of the spectrum in our society, So I covered Deirdre Crowley there, it could be a year ago now, who was only 4 years of age and was murdered in a murder-suicide by her father, That one really kind of got me, That was an upsetting one to cover. And then at the other end of the scale, you have Tilly Campbell from County Down, who was a 77-year-old lady.
Right.
And she was murdered by a drunkard, basically. I don't know if you use that word nowadays, do you?
Well, you use several other ones.
Yeah. Who gave her a vicious death, And not only that, then while the poor woman was dying on the floor, he ransacked the house and then set fire to it.
Yeah.
That one I couldn't get out of my head, because you'd be thinking of all, we're all going to be elderly if we're lucky enough to be elderly.
And how can somebody do that? Get into the mind state that they can just do it. I don't know.
Yeah.
I found up myself with a couple of cases over the years now, and likewise, you remember the gruesome ones and whatnot, or your first, dead body, first murder scene, that type of stuff. But I think with me, like that again, I've been lucky in that I haven't had to deal with too many cases involving kids.
Yeah.
I've dealt with cases involved with handwriting, the handwriting end of it, that involve children and stuff like that. And those ones are difficult, just to get your head around.
Yes.
And if anything, it was the handwriting cases that I was involved in that stick with me more, because the whole nature of doing that, examining handwriting, is you're constantly looking at it, say a letter or a suicide note or whatever the case may be, and you're constantly absorbing it because you have to look at all the details and all the constructions and stuff like that. And when you look at somebody's handwriting, say a letter written by a victim or something like that, that's like a little bit of a time capsule.
Yes,
back to when that moment when they wrote it, maybe their distress.
What their mindset was like.
Yeah, what the mindset. Yeah. And you're stepping back into that. And, this is the ink on the paper that person put down there that may not be around anymore.
Yes.
But those ones have stuck with me over the years more than
I can imagine they would.
More than the ones you might think.
Yeah, because you're getting into their head. You're literally in their head.
And when you're doing that, at least I found when you're doing that kind of examination stuff with handwriting, you're very much zoned out. It's you and the writing that's in front of you.
Yeah.
Nothing
else exists around
Nothing
you.
else exists.
Yeah.
And so it's those ones. But recently, and again, I only was involved in the periphery of it, the Justine Valdez one. That one just really got under my skin.
Oh my God, yeah. That
You
one.
know,
That's a very sad case. She, an only child.
yeah, and the parents moving here to find work and bringing her over a few years later. And just this random thing happening that you would never dream of. You know, you could get hit by a car or you could get mugged on the street or something like that. But this random thing.
Yes.
And it turned out to be such a horrible...
It had such an awful ending, even if they were... And she'd been witnessed in the car by so many people,
But then people wouldn't be even expecting something.
No, you wouldn't.
Like
You're going along about your day. I'm just picturing myself running into Tesco or Aldi or something, and you see, you're not in that mindset of there's a girl in a car over there that's just after being bundled into a car. You're not thinking down those lines. You might think, oh, she's had an argument with her boyfriend or something.
Something like that. Especially not in a leafy suburb or, in South Dublin or North Wicklow or wherever it is. But I think it's one that I'll always...
It'll stay with you.
Stay with me.
Yeah.
And Nules, have you ever come across in some of the cases that you've covered where one small little thing, can change everything in a case? Anything like that?
Yeah. The one that really comes to mind for me for that one is Elaine O'Hara. I mean... She was missing for ages. They thought suicide initially and all that. And then we had an unusually warm summer.
That's right, yeah.
The summer of 2013. And the Vartree Reservoir in Wicklow dropped dramatically. And there, in all their glory, was all the evidence that had been thrown into
it was just, because I remember when it happened, and I remember people talking about it in work. And even some of our own were kind of like, there's no way that guard went out there and looked over and said, but that's what happened, it's good police work with good luck.
But it was a real sliding doors moment. You had that, it was a kind of like that started the ball rolling. And then amazingly, within, was it 3 days? I can't remember, it was about 3 days later, her remains were found by a dog walker. I mean, just randomly, her dog kind of went... I mean, poor Elaine's remains had been out there for over a year, I think.
Yeah.
So in the space of 3 days, you had found all the vital clues that you needed, evidence, and you had the remains.
Yeah.
And that to me was mind-blowing. Like, we never get hot weather, really, in this country.
Not much now,
So they were probably... Our Graham Dwyer was probably banking on the fact that reservoir was going to stay, at a certain... level throughout the year.
Yeah.
He wasn't banking on us having a lovely warm summer that year. So that's the one that really when I was doing it, I was like, oh my God, this is unreal. Yeah,
like sometimes you just need one little thing which will maybe start the ball rolling and snowballs, and then another thing follows and another thing follows. Like recently we covered the murder of Aunt Rosalina, and initially it was thought that she'd committed suicide by hanging.
That's right.
But like that, I think it was a phone call from Antra's boss where she worked in the local mushroom farm. This was in Killinaleck up in Cavan. And he said to the guards that there's no way that she was depressed. She was happy. She had booked tickets to go back home to Latvia. She was looking forward to that, to go back and see her daughter. So, the guards looked at it a little bit closer.
Yeah.
And they got a second autopsy by a state pathologist who said, no, this isn't right. This is something different. It's not consistent with, ligature strangulation due to hanging, which would leave a certain type of marks and stuff on the neck. They got a structural engineer down or up from Dublin, and he was able to show that flimsy shower rail wouldn't have been able to support her weight, and they could prove that. And that, that's great evidence, because when it comes to a court case or trial or whatever, and you're talking to a jury, it's evidence like that it's black and white. Like, it's not done up in legal speak. That's like the one an upcoming one. It's not out yet, obviously. Siobhan McLaughlin. She was murdered by her husband in Dublin, it's gone back 20 years now. I'm just trying to...
the flex of the Dyson
Hoover. I think that's the same. I think it's the same structural engineer.
Really?
Yeah, because in getting a bit of background on the Aunt Rosalina case, I found out
one of the things that they realised.
It was the same structural engineer. I can't think of his name now.
He had staged the whole scene, like.
it's very similar to that.
Yeah,
the Siobhan
that's what I was
Carney
saying
one.
when you
Yeah.
started talking there about. I was there. That's from because it's fresh in my mind now, obviously because I've just done it, and I was saying because and I think it was a Professor Mary Cassidy was basically saying as well that the flex wouldn't have been strong enough to cause the damage
Yeah,
to her neck, and it broke basically. Like it would have broke if
yeah,
it was snapped.
yeah.
So
Yeah,
they
just
think
little
they
bits.
think they're being intelligent with the way they set these scenes up, but
Yeah,
you know.
sometimes I think that they try to set things up too perfect
Yeah.
or whatever.
Yes.
But it's always amazing that one small little thing can make a big difference.
It's like one little thread and you pull it. Yeah.
Yeah, fascinating.
Fascinating. It is fascinating, actually, yeah.
And you've already said, Nules, that you've had family members of victims and that on your podcast.
That's right.
So, like, do you ever find that they do get back to you, or you've maybe kept in contact with them and stuff like that?
Yeah, I've kept in contact with any of the ones that I have been on. I have kept in contact not with them, not on a regular basis, but if and I'd text them, see how things are going, and things like that.
Great,
and like the Imelda Keenan one that I was talking to you about earlier, like she was, Gina had just started this petition that she wanted signed, to try and so that they'd have enough signatures to send to the Minister for Justice, to try and get the case upgraded to murder. And that petition is still up there if anybody does want to sign it. They're desperately trying to get the numbers.
Yeah.
Just to try so they'll have enough to send to the Minister for Justice. So that in itself, if I can help even that little way, that's something small that you can do in the midst of everything else that you're trying to do, So, Dean Roach's, family, I dip in and out with them as well, see if there's any news, if there's anything that needs to be updated, So, I do my best to.
Yeah, that's great. It's great that people
follow them up as much as I can,
and it's great that people trust you.
Yeah, well, I hope they do. Yeah, because that's because I'm only out to try and help them. You know what I mean? That's the end game, end goal for me. Even sometimes just to talk about it, if nothing ever comes of it, just for them to be able to talk about it and know that it's been blasted out to the nation.
Yeah,
can give them a bit of peace of mind. In itself.
Like I'm not around in this game as long as you are, but I have seen through the emails and whatnot coming in that people are grateful for these stories being told, and we have had contact with some family members and stuff like that, and it's been largely very positive. But like it's to be trusted to say,
with their story,
and to do it accurately and respectfully, but factually,
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose just it's important as well for the public to know that they're being trusted with the story as well, and to talk about it respectfully and that as well,
And the two of us, Nules, are involved in true crime, like it or not.
Yeah.
I never thought I would be. Well, I worked in an industry
now
or
officially
whatever
cool,
that was
John.
true crime, but now I'm kind of, involved in it as a banner thing
You're
to
the host
true
of
crime.
of one of their
And it has exploded, and I've seen it myself. I watch true crime documentaries. I like them when they're done right,
Absolutely. Yeah.
But do you ever worry about how these stories are consumed or anything? I don't.
Yeah, you would. You do worry, that I suppose with doing the podcast comes responsibility, doesn't it? That you're, like you said, not telling the story for the sake of it and sensationalizing it and adding bits that don't really exist, just to kind of make it sound way more exciting.
Yes,
or whatever. Do you know?
Like you see some of these things, and true crime, and he never knew this was going to happen, and then it happened. Blah blah blah.
Just to suck people in.
Yeah, but it's important then not to be too clinical.
No,
well,
obviously you want to show that you have compassion and genuine compassion, and I think for you as well as myself, you can hear it. You can hear it through the radio waves or whatever they call them these days. You can hear it that when you're telling your story, you have genuine compassion for the person whose story you are telling. So that's very important, I think.
Absolutely,
that the people listening trust the host. that's important, I think.
Yeah, like, I mean, because when I said to a friend of mine there before Christmas that I'd met you and we were talking, like, and she was like, "Oh, Nules, I love Nules." And it's not like, "Oh, I love Iron Crimes and Mysteries." It's like, "No, I'm listening to Nules."
Yeah.
So they trust you, and
I'm still trying to get my head around that.
they trust you, and that's great. It's fantastic.
Yeah. Well, I hope they do. Yeah, because that's
because they know, okay, that you're not being too clinical and too dry or whatever like that, but you don't, you have to not step over that line into sensationalism or,
It's like what I said at the start. You have to tell the stories with it in the back of your head while you're telling the story. Somebody related to this person might be listening. So, that's what I have to be always saying to myself as I'm recording, that I don't want to upset anyone, I suppose. Obviously, sometimes people are going to get upset when they hear the story back again, and it's all raw and what have you, But they, I suppose, from our point of view, we're coming from a place of caring. You know what I mean? We're wanting to help. We're wanting to get justice for them. Let them find out what's happened to their family member.
Yeah, and not necessarily justice in the legal definition.
No.
Justice as justice. In,
Listen, I've heard it time and time again, John, and I'm sure you have now at this stage, from family members that, especially ones say that have people missing for 30 and 40 years, they're not even interested in justice in the legal term anymore. They just want their family member back in whatever way that means having them back.
Yeah, closure
so that they
of
can,
some sort.
Closure, so that they can bury them with their other family members, or that they've somewhere that they know where they are, basically. And I've heard that so many times. That's the main thing I actually hear now. So, like, as I always say, if you have information and you're afraid to come forward with it, just go to I don't know, get a burner phone, or go to if there are phone boxes around, and just ring in the tip. You know what I mean? And tell the police if you're afraid to come forward yourself, just give the information and let these poor people, have some modicum of peace in their minds.
Well, Nules, thank you very much for joining me today. Like, we could talk all day.
We could.
Yeah.
Sure, we might talk again. You
Absolutely.
never know.
Yeah. You'll have me down to the milking parlour now. Sure.
I will. You can milk a few cows for me while you're there.
Let's just say that it's, it's your podcast studio. That's not kind of some other thing I'm alluding to. But
I'm selling cartons of cream while you're there as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Brilliant. Well, anyway, thank you very much, Nules.
Oh, listen, it was a pleasure, and it's an honour to be on Lines of Enquiry. And,
well, thank you.
You're doing a great job, stellar job.
And you too. Yeah. We're just following in your footsteps now.
Thanks very much, John.
Well, thank you for listening to this episode of Lines of Enquiry. If you enjoyed the podcast, please consider giving us a 5-star rating and review, sharing it to your story on social media, leaving a comment below, or simply telling a friend you enjoyed it. Your support helps us make more episodes. If you'd like to get in touch, you can email linesofenquiry@goloudnow.com and follow us on Instagram at Lines of Enquiry Podcast. Lines of Enquiry is presented by me, John Sweetman. The podcast is created by Darren Cleary. Our executive producer is Owen Brennan, and Aoife Plunkett is our producer. Remember, in the end, everything done in the dark comes to light.